So the first thing you want to do when you order a glass of wine is you actually want to stop and just look at it. Hold it up to the light and admire that color there. It's amazing how many different hues wine comes in. I've seen whites that have a pale greenish tint. I've seen pale straw to deep buttery yellow on the red side. They range from clear garnet to a deep inky purple, almost like squid ink. So we've all seen wine aficionados swirling their wine. You may wonder why they're doing it. And you may be concerned that if you attempt to do that, that it's going to come flying right out of the glass. It does happen. If you're concerned, just set it down on the base of the table and swirl lightly. What you're doing is you're actually allowing the air to get into the wine, and that's going to bring out a lot of aromas and a lot of flavors. People use a lot of wine terminology. They'll talk about the wine opening up like it's a flower. That actually does happen. What that means is that there are a lot of latent characteristics in the wine that don't come out until they're good and ready to. And in order to get them to come out a little sooner, you want to get that air into the wine. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to smell it. You're going to stick your nose right in the glass as deep as it's going to go. Don't drink it yet, just smell it. So there are a couple of things that may come to mind in terms of aroma. Aroma is the preferred wine term. We tend not to say smell because smell could have a negative connotation. You can call it whatever you like. We're talking about the same thing. And there are some unpleasant or traditionally unpleasant aromas associated with wine from time to time. So some of the most common things that you'll experience when you first go in for that sniff are floral, botanical type of smells, also fruit, also vegetal, and finally, depending on the wine, sometimes you get some real earthy smells going on. Okay, now you get to taste. So when you drink the wine, again, you'll notice some wine aficionados making this kind of like slurping sound. What they're trying to do is get the wine over as many different parts of the tongue as possible, because different parts of your tongue are going to pick up different aspects of the wine. This is what's so cool and interesting about wine, why people are so interested in it, because it's very complex. There are many, many different sorts of notes and associations that come just from a single sip of the stuff. So that's one of the reasons that people are so very passionate about it. If you don't want to slurp, you don't have to, but just try to get as much of your tongue into the whole act as you possibly can. So another cool and interesting thing about wine is that whatever aromas you picked up when you were initially checking it out may have been deceptive. What you taste is often different, sometimes complementary, sometimes entirely surprising, than what you smell. Also pay attention to how the wine tastes when it first hits your tongue, especially the front part of your tongue, which is the part that's going to pick up any sweetness. As it travels over more towards the back of your tongue, other types of characteristics may come out. With white wines, you get a lot of apricots, peaches, pears, apples, those types of fruit-forward notes. Some wines are going to give you butter, they're going to give you toast, vanilla. This is most often a byproduct of the oak that particular wine was most likely aged in, not a characteristic inherent to the grape itself. However, certain types of wine, particularly Chardonnay, particularly California Chardonnay, has almost become synonymous with the taste of like buttered popcorn. You can also get a lot of minerals depending on the region that your white wine comes from, and that's going to happen more towards the back of the sip. Red wines, many are very fruit forward, and when you hear again these terms like fruit forward, a lot of times it's berries or stone fruit. It just means that's the first thing that hits you when you drink it. Then you get into some more unusual tasting notes. Again, on the red side, you get things like leather, pencil shavings. One of my favorites is sweaty saddle, barnyard. Things that, again, would be traditionally unpleasant doesn't necessarily mean that they are. Or maybe wine lovers, can just be weird. They're into weird. So something else you want to pay attention to is not just how the wine tastes, but how it feels in your mouth. What's going on in there? That's one of the awesome things about wine is it's an experience and it touches all of the different senses. So when we say feel, there's actually a term in wine called mouthfeel, and I don't know why, since we're not allowed to say smell, we think mouthfeel is acceptable. Stemless glasses are not ideal for real wine drinking, by the way. They look really cool, and I happen to like them, but this is not a cognac. We're not trying to heat it with our bodies. So if you do have a stemmed glass, be sure to hold the wine by the stem, not by the bowl. So back to mouthfeel. Some wines are going to feel very kind of fresh and light in your mouth. Some are going to feel almost oily. Um, some wines are going to make you feel like you have to salivate a little bit more. That's actually the acidity in the wine, and some wines are far more acidic than others. Some wines you're going to feel the opposite. It feels like all of the moisture is drying up in your mouth. That is a very tannic wine. Tannins are something that reside in the skins of red grapes, so you're going to experience that with certain but not all red wines. One suggestion I like to make for those who are more interested in learning how to taste is go to a restaurant with a pretty decent by the glass list. Order something that you wouldn't normally order that you're not familiar with. Don't read the tasting notes if they're on the menu, or don't look them up yet. Taste it, form your impressions, write them down, then look up online or go to the menu and see what the accepted tasting notes are. How close were you? If you're completely off base, don't worry about it. Again, this is your wine, it's your experience. But it's interesting as you become more experienced at tasting how similar or not those impressions get to the generally accepted characteristics of the wine. So someone actually asked a really good question. We were talking about different aromas and different notes that we were all getting from the wine. And someone asked, well, how do they get the apples and the pears into the wine? They don't. There are no apples and pears in wine. Wine is made from grapes, at least the wine that we're talking about today. Um, but then that becomes a really good question. How do we get all these interesting characteristics? And the short answer is chemical compounds. But again, that is what's so interesting and mysterious about wine and what's kept people captivated, I guess, for so many centuries, is that it's a very specific thing, but it has so many influences and so many expressions of other things. It's almost like poetry in a glass.